Americans lose billions of dollars each year to fraud. To get your money, con artists and shady businesses use fake websites, create bogus testimonials, and post phony reviews. Even the savviest consumer can get taken for a ride, but it's easier to protect yourself when you know the tricks the fraudsters are using. So in this episode, we're going to talk about that. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, a contributing editor at checkbook.org.
Welcome to Consumerpedia at checkbook.org. We're the nonprofit that helps consumers select services, avoid trouble, and save money. Because we don't accept any advertising or take money from any business we recommend, you can rely on checkbook.org to be completely independent and objective. Now, here's the host of Consumerpedia, America's consumer expert, the Consumer Man, Herb Weisbaum.
Congress created the Federal Trade Commission to protect us from false and deceptive business practices, to set the rules for fair commerce, and take legal action against those who don't follow them. Regulating the marketplace has always been a challenge, but digital technology and online commerce make it so much easier for scammers to lie, cheat, and deceive you. Sam Levine runs the Consumer Protection Division at the Federal Trade Commission. He joins us today from FTC headquarters in the nation's capital. Sam, it is so nice to talk to you.
And nice to be with you, Herb.
So when I started covering the consumer beat, we all wrote checks. Most scams came through the mail. There was no email. The dreaded robocall didn't exist, and neither did cryptocurrency. How has technology made it harder for you to protect us from scammers and dishonest businesses?
It's a great question, Herb. The reality is that scammers have been incredibly innovative. And I will say that among the technological developments that really keeps me up at night is the rise of fraud on social media. Just one of many ways scammers are finding ways to part consumers with their money. But we've seen a really remarkable surge in reported fraud that originated on social media. So for example, in 2021, total reported losses from fraud originating on social media were 18 times higher than they were in 2017. And there's a reason for this. Social media allows scammers to reach vast numbers of consumers quite cheaply. It allows them to target consumers quite precisely, and it allows them to part consumers from their money in a frictionless way through online payments and other means. So it is increasingly challenging to make sure that consumers are protected when they're online. And that's why over the last year in particular, but over the course of many years, the FTC has really been on the forefront of making it clear to companies and to scammers that the same consumer protection laws that apply in a brick and mortar business apply online. And we're prepared to take action against companies that prey on people through social media. And we're prepared also to shine a spotlight on social media companies that are not doing enough to police this problem on their own platforms.
When I talk to victims, a lot of people don't realize that social media accounts can be hacked and that your supposed friend is really a scammer pretending to be your friend. That's something that people have to realize.
It's very important that people realize that. And I think one of the reasons people don't, Herb, is I think there's a lot of sense of shame for being a victim here. I think people who have been victimized by these scams may feel, and I've talked to people who this has happened to, they feel a sense of shame, they feel a sense of embarrassment. And, one message that I want to be sure your listeners hear and that I relay to consumers all the time is people should not be ashamed. The techniques scammers use are very carefully honed to trick people, and it's very normal for people to be tricked. These are highly sophisticated tools of manipulation. I know consumer protection attorneys who have fallen prey to scams. There's nothing embarrassing about it. And the best way to take it on, in addition to vigorous law enforcement by the FTC and our law enforcement partners, people should be upfront about what happened to them. We have a consumer education campaign called Pass It On. And what that encourages people to do is pass along lessons they've learned to their friends and neighbors about how to spot scams and how to avoid them. Because there's really nothing shameful about being a victim of a scam, and you can help protect your friends and neighbors by spreading the word about what happened to you.
Very, very important. Sam, an FTC report found that Americans lost more than $1 billion in crypto scams since 2021. Everything from bogus crypto investments to romance scammers who now target their victims, and instead of asking for money, they ask you to send digital coins. I think people need to be aware that anytime you're asked to pay in crypto, whether it's for some kind of purchase or some kind of opportunity, or your lover overseas is asking you for sending crypto, you got to stop and think really carefully.
That's absolutely right. We issued a report in June that showed a huge surge in crypto losses. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau issued a report that showed a similar surge. And there are some clear lessons to draw here. For one, people who promise massive returns are probably trying to scam you. No one can guarantee massive returns on an investment. Nobody legitimate is going to require you to buy cryptocurrency. If you're on a dating website and someone who might be courting you or someone you might be courting is trying to get you involved in an investment program, that's a major red flag. We tell people don't mix online dating and investment advice. When we do encounter fraud in this marketplace, we take action. This is costing people a lot of money. The complaints we get really are the tip of the iceberg. And we want people to be careful in using these products and heed some of our warnings about red flags.
Sam, I'd like to talk to you about some of the big issues American consumers are facing right now and how you, the FTC, are trying to do something about it. Let's start with digital deception, specifically the serious problem of fake reviews and deceptive endorsements. And why don't we start with fake reviews? So many people rely on reviews before they make a purchase, and those reviews may not be honest.
Fake reviews have really become a scourge. We're concerned not only about fake reviews, which are reviews that are essentially made up. Someone writes them, maybe someone inside the company writes a review. We're concerned about review suppression, where companies, they see a bunch of reviews of their products or services and they remove the negative ones. Review manipulation. There's a whole host of problematic review practices that are designed to manipulate consumers. And, one of the things that concerns me is that consumers really rely on online reviews to buy their products and services. And when reviews are fake or when they're manipulated, it can lead to consumer harm in that they can buy a product that they didn't want, that doesn't work as advertised. It can also harm honest businesses who don't manipulate their reviews and are then put at a competitive disadvantage when their competitors do. So we've been quite aggressive at the FTC in taking on this problem. We brought a number of cases, including major litigation we announced just a couple months ago against Roomster. We announced a case against Fashion Nova, against a company called Hubble. We issued hundreds of notices of penalty offenses. So we've been very active in taking on this problem, but it has not gone away. Consumers should be aware manipulated online reviews is a problem and that ultimately they're the best judges of whether products and services meet their needs.
Now let's take on testimonials, including fake testimonials, as well as endorsements from celebrities and sports figures and social media influencers that may be bought and paid for, but the consumer doesn't know because it's not disclosed.
That's exactly right. This is a problem that goes back decades. You had in the 1950s doctors going on TV saying, buy this type of cigarette, when it turns out they were being paid by the tobacco manufacturers. What's changed, Herb, is that online commerce has made this a lot easier, and it makes the potential for manipulation a lot greater.
The FTC is also cracking down on junk fees that are tacked onto the bill that were not disclosed up front, and we're going to talk about that next. This is Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
Checkbook.org can save you money on all sorts of services you need and help you find high-quality businesses in your area. From tax preparers and auto mechanics to electricians and plumbers, we have ratings in these 7 metro areas: Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle, San Francisco, Minneapolis-St. Paul, and Washington, D.C. To find out more, visit checkbook.org. Our advice is always free. Ratings of local services are available with a subscription. If you live in one of these 7 areas and haven't joined Checkbook yet, check us out. Get a free 30-day subscription by going to checkbook.org/Consumerpedia.
Have you ever made a purchase, thought you knew the final price, and then you find out there's a fee tacked onto the bill that you were never told about? These junk fees add up to tens of billions of dollars a year, and the Federal Trade Commission is exploring a rule that would crack down on the proliferation of these junk fees. Sam Levine runs the Consumer Protection Division at the Federal Trade Commission. Sam, why don't you tell us what's going on and how some new rules might help?
Junk fees are nothing new. Just about everyone I know, including myself, have begun a transaction based on an advertised price, and somewhere along the way, a couple screens through, you realize that there's some fee at the end that wasn't disclosed up front. And sometimes that fee can be quite significant. Sometimes there can be multiple fees. And by that time, you might have entered all of your personal information, your payment information. You've sort of gotten excited about the product or service you're buying. And you might just say, forget about it, I'm going to pay the fee. But one of the messages we're trying to send, Herb, through our law enforcement and through the rulemaking that you just referenced is that tricking consumers into paying junk fees is against the law, especially when it involves deception. And we cite a number of examples in our rulemaking of cases we brought. I'll give you one recent example. We brought a case against a chain of auto dealers called Napleton. And what the company was accused of doing is adding fees when they purchased a car for services that were already included in the base price of the car. And one of my worries, Herb, is that as prices rise throughout the economy, we're seeing significant inflation, that companies are going to try to conceal their price increases by tacking on fees instead. And that is unfair to consumers. And again, it's unfair to other companies that are advertising their prices honestly, because then they're put at a competitive disadvantage, even when the ultimate price of the products they're selling might be lower. What we have asked the public to weigh in on is, again, whether we should issue formal rules to prohibit some of the worst practices that affect consumers. But I also want to be clear that in the interim, we're going to continue to bring major cases to make clear to companies that if they try to trick consumers with junk fees, they're going to pay a price.
So if you're an auto repair shop that has a oil disposal fee tacked onto the bill, or if you're a restaurant that has the kitchen fee tacked onto the bill, you need to let people know that up front. It's got to be clear, not all of a sudden at the end, oh yeah, we just add that to everybody's bill. Is that what we're basically saying here?
Yeah, it's got to be clear. You need consumers' consent. Transactions are two-sided. Both sides need to agree. And you can't just sneak on terms at the end. This is a clear principle that comes through decades of FTC enforcement work, including many cases over the last year. And we chronicle many of those cases in our rulemaking. And again, we're considering whether to go a step further and formalize some of these rules. And we welcome input from the public on that.
And I would suggest to listeners, if you find yourself in this situation, don't just roll over and accept it. Push back. Say to them, where did you tell me about this? There's no disclosure of this. I'm not going to pay it. I mean, they need to know that this isn't right.
Absolutely. And if they feel they've been deceived, they should report it to the FTC. Reportfraud.ftc.gov. We make it really easy to share complaints. Law enforcers throughout the country and in fact the world have access to these complaints. And if we get a lot of complaints about a company, we're going to pay attention. So we really encourage people to file complaints with us.
You know, a lot of times I hear from businesses that they don't like regulation. I mean, that's fairly obvious. And I always tell them, if the playing field is level, if everybody's playing by the same rules, which is the whole job of the Federal Trade Commission, it's really good for legitimate businesses. You want to be able to compete with somebody who's competing against you fairly.
Yeah, I think that's a really important insight, and I can't underscore that enough. The practices we're describing, they absolutely cheat consumers. Junk fees, fake reviews, these cheat consumers, but they divert sales from the businesses that actually play by the rules. It should be in everyone's interest to have upfront disclosure of prices. It should be in everyone's interest to have honest reviews. But it's such a critical point that what's good for consumers is ultimately good for honest businesses as well.
And let's not forget, businesses are consumers as well. They can get hit by supply scams. They can get hit by the fake calls. We're going to turn off your utilities and pay us money. They're also consumers. They want somebody watching out for them too.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we are doing. We had a case recently against a company called First American Payment Systems. And that was a case about small businesses allegedly getting ripped off by their payment processor. We brought cases on small business debt collection, small business credit reporting. Small businesses not only compete with other businesses, but they're also consumers themselves, as you said, Herb, and they can be victims of some of the same practices that ordinary consumers are victims of.
Sam, since the pandemic, there has been a really big push to buy products made in America, but you, the FTC, have found that some things supposedly made here are not made in the USA. Tell us about that and how you're trying to crack down on that.
It's always been the case for many American consumers that they want to buy products that are made in the U.S., whether that's out of patriotism, whether that's because they prefer to support U.S. labor, U.S. environmental standards, support for local communities and local jobs. There are all sorts of reasons why Americans want to buy American. And there are studies that suggest Americans will actually pay more for products that are made in America. But that's exactly why we are seeing a real problem with made in USA fraud and made in USA deception, where companies falsely claim their products are made in the USA when actually they're made overseas. We've brought a number of cases in this area. We recently brought a case against a company called Lithionics, which makes lithium-ion batteries. They were falsely labeling their products as made in USA. We had a case against Lions Not Sheep, patriotic t-shirts that were actually made in China, as alleged in our complaint, was removing the Made in China labels and putting on Made in America labels. And we're taking aggressive action. Herb, in addition to these cases, we actually finalized a rule at the end of 2021 that officially prohibits false Made in USA labels. And the reason that's significant, and I want marketers to understand this, is that if you mislabel your product Made in USA when it's not all or substantially all made in the US, you can face civil penalties of up to $46,000 per violation. The cost can really add up, and the message we are sending to marketers is if you say your product is made in America, it had better be made in America. Because we know that there are firms that actually build their products here in the US that pay the higher labor costs, and they have a right to compete fairly, and they shouldn't need to compete with those who cheat.
Absolutely. Children are a special category of consumers who might not realize the tricks that advertisers use to get them to nudge their parents into buying something they want. That's another area the FTC is concerned about, and that's up next. This is Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
Consumerpedia Fast Facts. According to the FTC, social media was far more profitable to scammers in 2021 than any other method of reaching people. 25% of all fraud losses reported to the FTC in 2021 resulted from scams that started on social media with an ad, post, or message. More than half the people who reported losses to investment scams in 2021 said the scam started on social media.
Children are a lucrative market, and advertisers have many ways to reach them through digital media. In October, the Federal Trade Commission held a conference to talk about protecting kids from stealth advertising in digital media. Sam, you assembled a variety of experts to talk about this. Can you share the major takeaways from the conference?
Yeah, this is a really important issue to think about. We know that kids are using a lot of online services, and a lot of times these online services are being paid for. Sometimes they're free, and often they're free, and they're being paid for through advertising. I'm talking videos, games, immersive environments like virtual reality. They're all types of services that kids consume. And one of our concerns is, are kids going to be able to distinguish between what is organic content and what is advertising? This has been a concern of the FTC for many decades, not only for children, but also for adults. You talked earlier about deceptive testimonials, where someone says, I used this razor and thought it was the best shave I ever had, without disclosing that, they're being paid by the company that makes the razor. It's hard enough for adults to distinguish between real content and content that's advertising. And it's even harder for kids, and it's even harder in the digital environment. You referenced the workshop we held in October, and what the workshop really focused on is the problem of blurred or embedded advertising directed to kids. And what we heard from experts, we really assembled, a really impressive group of experts, is that these online environments are highly complex and make it really hard for kids to realize what they're seeing as an ad. Even though these kids are, digital natives, they grew up on the internet, they grew up probably more proficient in online services than many adults. But still, what the experts tell us is that they can't always distinguish between what's real and what's an ad. So we are considering, we're putting together a record on this, and we're considering what we can do to make sure that kids aren't harmed by this kind of deception.
Could you give an example of what might be blurred content?
Sure. Well, this can take all different forms. Let's say a kid is playing a video game and they're offered a reward for, achieving some milestone. And this is kind of a silly example, but let's say it's a box of cereal, and it's a cereal from a particular brand. What the child might not understand is that the reason that cereal is being offered as a reward is because the company that makes the cereal is paying the company that makes the video game to embed this content in the video game. If all goes according to the advertiser's plan, the child then goes to the parent and says, I want this kind of cereal. It's clearly a cereal that is appealing to me. And what we just seen is successful advertising, but that is not known to the child, and it might not be known to the parent either. So we want to make sure companies are being honest, that kids and parents aren't being tricked. We know that children are more susceptible to this type of manipulation than adults. And we want to make sure that the digital environment is not shot through with fraud and false advertising.
And in the example you just gave with the consumer being a child, disclosure doesn't get around the situation. You can't disclose to them that we're advertising ABC cereal to you, sugar, sugar, sweetie, sweeties. That doesn't handle the situation here.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. One of the things we did explore is, are there disclosures that are sufficient? But I think there are real questions about what type of disclosure could possibly be sufficient. A child sees the word ad next to the box of cereal I was describing. I'm not sure that really makes a difference, especially when you consider that this is sophisticated advertising. The whole look and feel of the messaging can create a sense that it's not commercial. We want clear lines between commercial content and non-commercial content. And, for adults, that can be achieved through disclosures. I think it's not totally clear if that can be achieved with children.
What you're talking about is a lot like product placement in movies. There's a reason why the good guy is drinking a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi, and there's a reason why they're driving a souped-up Ford or whatever. It's because the company paid to have that in there. That's a form of advertising.
Exactly. It's a form of advertising. And again, we have concerns about it with adults, but we have particular concerns around it with kids who just are not likely to understand that.
And the other thing is, do the parents even understand that? When I was a kid, when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, you sat in front of a TV, your parents were watching what you were watching, they saw the ads or whatever. These days, the kids are on their cell phones in the backseat of the car or on a laptop or whatever. Parents probably have no idea what the content is that they're seeing.
I think that's right. And I want to be careful that we don't, and I know this is not what you were doing, but I want to be careful that we not shame parents over this, right?
Right.
We all understand parents are incredibly busy. Children are consuming a lot of online services. For many months, they were being educated online. You can't put the onus on parents to be monitoring their children 24/7 around the content they consume. My perspective is that we need to make sure it's advertisers who are not using blurred lines and manipulative techniques to sell things to children in a way that's manipulative.
So, Sam, before we go, how about telling people what they can find if they go to the FTC's website, ftc.gov?
We absolutely encourage people to go to our website, not only consumers, but also small businesses. We have a whole host of resources available. One key resource is being able to report fraud. If you go to ftc.gov, you see a link at the top to report fraud, to report illegal business practices. We bring cases when we hear from consumers about problems they've encountered in the marketplace. So we really encourage consumers, if they hear something, if they experience something, tell us about it. Consumers can also browse a whole host of resources on identity theft, on robocalls, on jobs and making money, on paying down your mortgage, paying down your credit card. We have a lot of consumer advice on our website. We have business guidance on our website, credit and finance, privacy and security, specific guidance for small businesses, advertising and marketing. Lots of resources to help small businesses stay on the right side of the law and make sure they're treating their customers fairly. And consumers and small businesses can also sign up for consumer alerts, so they can learn about the latest scams that are proliferating, and also read our blogs, both our business blog and our consumer blog, that provides important information on the consumer protection work we're doing. So please do visit ftc.gov. Everything on it is free, and everything on it, I think people will find it to be very useful.
I'm signed up for the fraud alerts, and they're very, very helpful. Our guest is Sam Levine. He runs the Consumer Protection Division at the Federal Trade Commission. Sam, thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk to us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, Herb.
Well, that's it for this episode of Consumerpedia. You can subscribe to us on Apple or Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. That way, you won't miss an episode. Remember, we release new ones every other Thursday. Another way you can support this show is to follow us on Consumerpedia on Facebook and Instagram, and at My Consumerpedia on Twitter. I'm Herb Weisbaum. Thanks for listening.
Consumerpedia is a public service of checkbook.org. We're a unique nonprofit that helps you save money and make smarter choices. You can count on Checkbook to help you find the best services and avoid the worst, with local ratings that are accurate and unbiased. If you live in or around these 7 cities and haven't joined Checkbook yet, check us out. Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle, San Francisco, Minneapolis-St. Paul, and Washington, D.C. To get your free 30-day subscription, go to checkbook.org/consumerpedia. If you like what you've heard, we hope you'll become a supporter by using the link at the bottom of the show notes to make a small contribution each month. Consumerpedia, empowering consumers to save money and make smarter choices.